Hello, mates of Thrive Nation. Got a very special guest on the show. He's an entrepreneur, biohacker, author of Your New Prime, and he's going to talk about new primers. So if you're out there and you're over the age of 40, you're male or you're female, if you're female, you can help your male partner, I think, in the most incredible way. From a man who looks like he's 41, but he's going to not tell us his age this time. He's an absolute machine with an incredible health network in the States. And he is Kiwi born, which I found out. Got an Aussie accent, but we forgive him because he's Kiwi born. So that's really, really cool. Though we love some of the health biohackers in Aussie as well. He's the CEO of Cardiex and Connect Health, and it's a privilege to have Craig Coop on the show.
Steve, good morning from California.
Yeah, brilliant. Craig, I want you to give us an incredible story of a new primer who's followed we're going to talk about the book, who's taken some of your principles or your blueprint, maybe a male over the age of 40 with typical signs and symptoms, maybe an archetype that you want to sort of print out to the audience and the video, because I think people are looking for something to relate to and they relate to stories. So let's get their attention, catch their attention with two incredible transformative stories.
Well, my journey's been really a personal one, Steve, because I had a very sick childhood. I had encephalitis when I was 9. I was in a coma for a month. I had osteomyelitis when I was 11, so I nearly lost my left leg. I had pericarditis when I was 18.
Sure.
So a viral sort of heart disease over the course of 2 to 3 years, which ended up in surgery when I was a surfer on the Gold Coast, waiting tables and cooking steaks in like the equivalent to the Outback Steakhouse, surviving on what I could. So sort of my sort of path to where I am now and sort of my history and sort of growth, particularly from a health perspective, has been very much rooted in my own story. And when I look back at sort of last few years and this whole move into sort of longevity and the biohacking market, and sort of people ask, how long have you been sort of in the health sector? Well, it's never really been my core business, but it's been my life, because my whole outlook was really sort of structured on sort of this Marcus Aurelius saying around memento mori, that you could leave this earth today. So for me, and I love the topic of your podcast, sort of Made to Thrive, because it's all been about thriving forward, and I talk about that in the book, and particularly thriving in the moment, because when we talk about longevity, for me it's really about sort of thriving in the moment, because I've had so many near-death experiences. I've fallen off buildings skateboarding, I've been hit by lightning, I've been caught under reef shelves in Tavarua surfing. So I've had so many instances where I could have just left this earth. So for me, and what I try to focus on every day is really about what can give me the most, what can allow me to thrive the most, mentally, sexually, emotionally, physically, in the moment, from a nutritional, from an exercise, from a mental health perspective. So that's really sort of defined me as I've moved forward. And when I look back, so I'm nearly 62. So thank you for not disclosing my age, but I'm quite proud of it, actually. So I'm nearly 62, and so I wrote the book, Your New Prime, about, I think 6.5, 7 years ago. From a scientific and from an application perspective, it's still just as valid today, if not more, than it was when I wrote it. Particularly when you look at sort of the catch up around some of the processes, procedures, and things that I was doing then and continue to do today. I mean, we were, 20 years ago, we were doing plunges, we were doing, ice heat rotations, fasting, when I was training with sort of this sort of famous Malibu crew that I used to train with. When we talk about fasting, when we talk about sort of, the ketogenic diet, fat diets, I mean, I used to have, 2 tablespoons of olive oil before I did my cardiovascular training when I was triathlon training, 35 years ago, actually. So all these things, the wisdom of, the beauty of age is the wisdom of age, right? And you can look back and, sort of everything sort of old is new again now in this sector. And it's really, we can talk about the biohacking movement. I've never actually been called that, but I'm happy to, talk about it because, everyone's trying to find their corner of the internet. Everyone's trying to sort of brand all this a lot differently, just because of the nature of the social world that we're in. So me, when I talk about what I do and things I do and how it applies to me, I'm very much an N of one. Um, I'm sort of very much against the personal training movement because to me, personal trainers, it's really, reading a copy of Men's Health magazine and learning to count to 10. I think it's very hard to really provide the sort of counseling, training, and application to individuals unless you sort of really understand them. There are big rocks that you need to get in place, I think, across the board. But once you sort of get into the sort of the sugar coating around the sort of the detail that let's call it the biohacker movement is going into, I mean, you really need to get what I call the big rocks in place before you even start to consider any of those things. So,
but give us a
I just
feedback on two stories, Craig. I mean, you must have written the book. I know you're well connected. A lot of people have probably read the book, given you testimonials about, I mean, you've even got Tony Robbins as a, a testimonial there. So give us some stories and then people can say, okay, we know, I mean, I've been a physician 26 years now. We know what's happening to testosterone, free testosterone levels, and people don't even they mention their total testosterone, not
yeah.
understanding how important free testosterone levels are, but decreased between 40 and 50% over the last 20 to 30 years. And we had Dr. Tracy Gappen. We'll put that, in the show notes. But tell
Yeah.
us about two great stories of people that have read your book or have come to you or view some of your principles, and what were those rock principles that changed these two people's lives?
Yeah, I think one was just recently, 3 weeks ago, when I was holidaying. Like randomly, a guy who I met at a cocktail party, who I'd met sort of 3 years before, and kind of remember, came up to him and literally said I changed his life. And really, this was at the point where he was looking at going on testosterone therapy. And my view on that, sort of the cliff notes around that, Steve, is that look, I'm not against it. A lot of people think I am, but what I am against is people taking or trying to find a short fix around anything. And so my counsel is always do everything you can from a naturopathic and lifestyle perspective, because all the symptoms of testosterone, well, most of them, if you look at, right from, sexual health, strength, emotional health, muscle mass, bone health, you can go through the list, and there's fundamentally a lifestyle and a naturopathic approach that you can apply to each of those. So my advice is always go through every single one of those aspects first and do an audit on yourself. And if all else fails, then have a look at it, but go into it with eyes wide open from the purposes of, risks and side effects and, impact,
Sure,
whether it's,
sure.
prostate cancer, cardiovascular disease, hematocrit levels, polycythemia, all of the above. And then, so that was one
So what did he
more
say?
recent one.
What was the tools, or did he read the book and say I did this, and
Yeah,
I got
Steve,
in the sun or got weightlifting? People are going to want to know. Hang on, read the book, and this guy's life's changed. What did he do specifically?
yeah, this was like, I mean, the two most simplest things you can do are, one, lose weight, and then focus on your sleep. I mean, if you look at the science, if you look at PubMed, all the research, really fundamentally, those are the two main things you need to focus on. I have guys text me, another example, a guy texted me about, oh, 2 months ago, hey, I'm looking at going on peptides. It's like, I'm just looking at this text going, dude, you can't be serious. I knew the guy was like 20 to 30 pounds overweight. So I sort of like kindly wrote back to him. I said, look, let's just push that discussion down the road, 6 to 12 months. Here's what I want you to focus on. Focus on one, alcohol, because I know he drinks a lot, right? Two, weight loss. And then really, really look at focusing on your sleep, because the stats around sleep and weight loss, it's really a percentage point for a pound loss. So you can lose 15 pounds of weight, 15% increase in testosterone levels. It's just amazing. And then from the same as sleep, those are people who sleep consistently 5 hours a night, across the board have, upwards of 20% less testosterone, to a counterpart who sleeps, 6 to 8 hours a night. So those are the two most fundamental things you have to change. And then always alcohol. So these are the big rocks before you get to peptides and TRT and rapamycin and just name them, right? Go down the Huberman or Atia hole, rabbit hole. Really focus on the big rocks. But the problem is here, like everywhere, but mostly here in the United States, people want an easy fix, right?
Yeah. No, and we
They want
can't
a pill.
blame them because the amygdala part of their brain, the reptilian part of the brain, wants to take the easiest route and spend the least amount of energy, and it's energy conservation. But they don't realize in the long term, we've got this frontal cortex, Craig, and this frontal cortex is there so we thrive in the moment and in the long term. And if you take the shortcuts, and if you're going to take the easy way and you're going to spend less energy and you're going to take more energy in, it's going to come a cropper. And that's because you're in the survival part of your brain instead of the thriving part of your brain.
Totally.
And that's a significant issue. But talking about weight loss, I want to pick up on that. Are you talking about body composition? DEXA has recently come to South Africa. It's been a technology
Okay.
for a long time. It's been a game changer using an AI algorithm. Plus, it's called DEXA AI here in South
Yeah.
Africa. But for my
Yeah.
corporates and my executives and my business leaders, it's been a game changer. Are we talking body composition with regards to being one of those new primers?
Yeah, absolutely. Dex is great. I actually had one 2 weeks ago just for sort of a sort of biannual bone density test, which is something, fundamental as you age. I'd love to talk about. But also used, for body composition, body fat composition. So those sort of tests, I think, are fundamental. Stage one, just the scales, right? Not necessarily the true indication because you can have a sort of excess of abdominal fat, which may not necessarily represent itself. So that's stage one. But again, focused on nutrition, weight, alcohol, all the big rocks. It's across the board. I mean, we see this happening with the GLP-1s, semaglutides, and the impact that those drugs are having. And you can go down the list, whether it's cognitive health, cardiovascular disease, osteoarthritis, cancer. When you fundamentally look at it, this all comes down to better insulin resistance and weight loss, right? So that is the key foundation to focus on, and especially as you age, because we start to go, we go off these cliffs, right? I hate to admit it because epigenetically I fight back against it so much, but 50, 55, 60, just shit happens, right? And you look in the mirror and you just go, what the hell? Where did that come from? Or, you're not benching or pushing or running or swimming or whatever it is, right? As hard as you used to. So for me, it's about focusing on those things, particularly the ones that matter to me as you age, and that mostly guys, but you're right in pointing out from a partner perspective, how impactful this is, because everything that we go through impacts our partners. And upwards of, I got given a statistic by HarperCollins that upwards of 40% of purchases of my books, they identified as females.
Sure.
So it impacts your partnerships, it impacts your relationships, and I've always said, there was this whole theory about the dad bod a few years ago, right? If you remember, with Seth Rogen, Leonardo DiCaprio, they all had the dad bods, and everyone was celebrating them, right? It's like, the dad bods, it's like, yes, we can be, chubby and cuddly and healthy too. And I went through this whole list of things why the dad bod was not healthy. And at the end of it, it was like, yeah, it's like, don't forget, he's Leo, you're not. He can get away with it. You can't, right? But as you age, there's just specific things that you need to focus on. I talk about bone health, which is a big thing. We talk about all the major organ diseases, cognitive health, obviously, kidney disease, colon health. These are the sort of biomarkers that resonate more for me, and I think should more and more for anyone over 50. Prostate health, again, another big one. So in terms of what's that sort of metabolic framework that I operate in terms of my testing and what I'm trying to, let's say, hack for, it's really the big metabolic and organ diseases, while at the same time sort of focusing on what I can maximize nutritionally and from a sort of exercise performance perspective. So
Brilliant.
I can just keep participating, Steve, right? Because I tried to say I'm competing, but I'm kind of really just participating now as best I can. But I
Sure.
want to stay in the game as much as I can.
Got you.
I want to keep doing as much as I can and as the best of my ability as I can for
Mm.
as long as I can.
Got you. Now, I've been, exercising 28 years, even since medical school. And what I found now recently doing the DEX, and I'd love your opinion as a technologist or tech entrepreneur, is that in the InBody, there's an InBody body scan. I don't know if I'm sure they got them in the US. You hold those dials, you stand on the
Oh, yeah.
scale, and it had me at 11% body fat. And I thought,
Okay.
oh, I'm 11% body fat. And my visceral fat was unfortunately a huge problem. And I did a lot to do that. And then I did the DEXA scan and I found that actually my body fat was 20%. All right.
Okay.
And my
Yeah.
visceral fat was like only 120 grams. So my score
Right.
out of 100 was 98 out of 100. Now, from a technology perspective, have you found that the in-body, these body compositions have not been accurate, where the DEX is the gold standard? Because that can get someone in significant trouble. I mean, I thought I was 11%. Okay, I thought my visceral body fat was significantly far worse than it is. But the DEXA just showed me how important it is to get accurate results from technology.
Totally. I'm not sure specifically what the other device is that you're referring to, but I've seen them in some gyms.
Yeah.
They use both a combination of pulse wave analysis through, I think there's some electrical sort of magnetic field that attempts to take body composition with. The Withings scale does something similar. It's a brand of medical devices,
Mm.
medical/consumer devices. But you're right, the accuracy is very questionable, which I think is across the board for a lot of these consumer devices. I mean, I have not wearing them at the moment, but I have a Whoop, I have a Aura, I have the Apollo Neuro, which I think I've seen you wearing
Yeah.
as well. Um, and in my sort of sort of crazy sort of manic periods, I'm wearing all of them. And I also wear Garmin 8, Phoenix 8, so which I actually think is the best across the board. But from the perspective of accuracy, I mean, there's a reason why they don't have FDA clearance. That's because they haven't been able to meet the gold standard for accuracy. So it's why you see most of the Apple Watch features is just for wellness purposes only. Aura can't make any claims. Whoop can't make any claims. And then to your point, we have this new term that's just come into the lexicon called orthosomnia, which is basically the anxiety caused through wearable devices, particularly as it relates to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, like
People
orthorexia, you
wake up and
become absolutely obsessed with health and
totally,
data and metrics for sure. So I mean, from a body composition, you concur, okay, you don't know in body, but you've seen the big difference. I mean, that scale is
yeah,
significant. So if you're listening out there, DEXA definitely is something from a technology perspective that's crucially important. Now, a
yeah,
tough question, and look at someone who's 40 now. Let's take a male, a business leader, entrepreneur, or corporate executive
yeah.
technology. So I'm going to be looking at. I've called myself many years physician for 26 years, but moving into the corporate space at Made to Thrive, and I've got a team that we're building up. So I've been always
Fantastic.
Africa's pro biohack and health futures, but I'm looking to change it because I've just realized technology, and if we understand what that actually means, it's an art and a craft, and then ology is the study or discourse or speech or using words. So you're a technologist, what I'm seeing at Cardiex, and we'll get into that and how important technology is. I say to our tribe that one of the greatest technologies was developed in 1835 by a German physician that no one knows, but people use it every single day, and it's called the mirror. And how important the mirror is to get feedback and data. You wouldn't dare these days not looking at the mirror from a technology perspective. So for
Yeah,
me, That's technology. Now,
For
if
sure.
we've got an order, people are listening. They can't do everything. And I'll give you some type of understanding. So the Whoop, the Aura, functional blood tests. We've been doing functional medicine 18 years. Okay.
Yeah,
So we look at a DEXA scan. We look at inflammatory markers, amino acid markers. You look at the omega-6, omega-3, the omega-3 index. Things that we look at a cognoscopy. Dale Bredesen's work at doing a cognitive performance test, which is fundamentally important. That's a technology in itself. Looking at things like genetic tests, looking at heart rate variability devices that are separate from Whoop and from Aura, looking at facial recognition. We're working with an incredible team now to try and scale a facial recognition assessment. They give you blood pressure, they give you cardiac risk, they give you stroke risk. If you take this all into perspective, because I think it's important, if we're going to beat chronic disease, we're not going to beat it by trying to treat the disease. We have to prevent the disease. That medicine,
totally.
Peter Attia called medicine 3.0. I've called it 4.0 because the last one is personal, proactive, okay, preventative, and performance enhancing. So I call it medicine 4.0. If we look at this, you're a technologist. I'm going to be branding myself a longevity technologist just to get people to try and sustain their change through technology, because I think it's so difficult now in these modern day times to actually prevent chronic disease. So give me your order, because I think you've got the ground rules, the ancestral practices, Craig, and that you've put in as a surfer and grounding and getting sunlight and lifting weights, those big rocks. But now we've got to try and prevent chronic disease. Where would you start on this list?
Lot to unpack there, Steve. Firstly, let me comment on your comment on the mirror. So the mirror actually that reflects how you see yourself.
There we go.
The camera reflects how others see you.
That's good. That's good. That's a nice
How often
correction
do
to
you
think about.
get a photo of you've seen yourself in the mirror, you get a photo of yourself and go, yeah, I don't look like that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's exactly how you look.
Okay.
The mirror has a psychological filtering in it,
I like that. I like
and it's it's a scientific fact.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
how you see yourself. And I'm just another point. I love Dale Bredesen. I'm in constant contact with him. Hopefully, doing a lot with him going forward with Cardiex, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think. Look, there's no one thing, right? In terms of health and in terms of longevity. So you know, it's a balance of many things. And when I say a balance, it's important because I think the biggest trouble I've gotten into my life is being at the extremes, right? So from an exercise perspective, from a dietary, from a supplementation perspective, all those have either got me sort of injured, ill, or sort of out of the game. So for me, looking back and sort of, I was asked the other week about, you know, what advice I'd give to my, you know, former, you know, my 40-year-old self, or even going back earlier. I wouldn't change anything because I think all the combination of everything I've done has sort of led me to where I am today. But I'll tell myself that there's a price to pay at some point, depending on what you choose and to do, and you know what path you choose to go down. And you know, I think we've seen this athletically more and more across the board. When you look at you know, athletes like Dave Scott, who just recently had you know, open heart surgery, 6 times Ironman champion. And you know, we've now discovered he's had a sort of 5 to 10 year history with cardiovascular disease. We look at Ryan Hall, America's greatest marathon runner, who basically became clinically hypogonadal in terms of his testosterone levels. Basically, had to pull out of marathon running, and now he's like a super jacked CrossFit guy. Just through lifestyle interventions, getting him back to the sort of level of health that he should be. So intensity and load all adds up, right? So you need to look at that. Again, wouldn't change anything, but you need to realize whether it's knee injuries or back injuries or whatever it is, all that adds up, right?
But
So
I'm going to push you on the number one technology that you're You're 40 years old now.
Yeah.
You're a person, you're running a business, you're an entrepreneur, you're getting hectic. What is the one first technology that you embrace? Then the second technology. Because I've been running Bloods 18 years
Right.
as a functional medicine. Is that the most important? Is getting 10,000 steps the most important?
Yeah.
Is doing a DEXA scan the most important? Is measuring
Yeah.
sleep the most important? Where do we start? I mean, I did Comrades. It's a 55-mile race every single year, 90 Ks. I did 11 in a row,
Yeah.
40,000 Ks on
Amazing.
the road.
Okay.
And my testosterone was slowly decreasing. My liver
Right.
enzymes were screaming at me. And in
Yeah.
2019, I was grateful that was my last one because in 2020 with COVID, they stopped the race and I had to hold back and say, my mentor said to me, you're going in the wrong direction with all this cardiovascular exercise. So if we put that all aside, people are listening to say, okay, I'm not going to count the blood tests that I go to my medical doctor, my GP, because they're looking for these
Yeah.
ranges that are extremely sick. Where do they go? What do they do?
Yeah. So I will answer the question.
Craig, I got to push you,
But
yeah,
I'll
Craig.
say, the first thing is that let's not forget that the technologies that we're exposed to, um, uh, uh, and the information that we're exposed to in the care group and support groups that we have around us are not available generally to the 99%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you look at the comments in sort of Peter Attia's YouTube channels, consistently it all sounds great, but how do I afford that when I'm struggling to pay rent? How do I get a gig stand? It's not covered by my insurance, which is not here in the United States. Even if even if you have low bone density, you still have to pay out of pocket for it. So a lot of, Aura rings are $350. People can't afford this. People
Mm.
complain about paying $5 a month on Strava, Steve. Let's not
Yeah.
forget, right?
Okay, so
So
then I'm going to
firstly,
reframe it for you, Craig, to make it easier. Let's talk about someone who can
I have one technology I'm going to tell you about. You ready?
I'm
Okay,
ready.
so we'll actually have two. We'll talk about Connect in a moment because I think arterial health's the number one thing you should be focused on at a metabolic level, given its impact across all the major diseases.
Mm.
But from a day-to-day accessibility perspective, I would say MyFitnessPal. I would say a nutrient, a macronutrient food monitor that you can easily access through an app that you can use to load your daily nutrients and food intakes with. It's pretty easy with scanning labels. Me, I'm easy. Slight breakfast, slice of Ezekiel bread, can of sardines, quarter of an avocado. It's pretty easy to log. Build that up. Build a profile of your nutrient profile, your calorie profile, and then if you have a smartwatch, you can pair that with your sort of metabolic load through the day in terms of your active metabolic load as well as your resting, and get an idea of what your total sort of calorie output is. And then you can get a pretty simple understanding of your surplus or deficit from a calorie perspective, and then the nutrients and macronutrients that you're getting every day. And I think over time, that forms a really, really foundational base. Now, I can do it really off the top of my head now. I know how many calories I'm sort of eating during the day. I got a good idea of magnesium, potassium stuff just through, the
Mm.
really
Wow.
the cookie cutter sort of diet that I have. But I think that would be the first step, because again, I think when you look at everything, really comes back to it. Foundationally, a lot of it is rooted in sort of insulin resistance and disease.
Okay, so brilliant. That's the first thing. That's excellent. And you've obviously done that for a while to understand your macronutrients. And that, as one gets older, I suppose in the 40s, that's even more important. And we've seen an increase in a lot of my clients and patients to take protein in because they've been
Yeah.
deficient in protein. And so that gives them a good idea. Okay, so that's number
It is
one.
an issue, though, if you want to talk about protein. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we can talk about it with pleasure. Anything that you want to talk about, I'm open to. But then let's take it also so there's no real barriers. I mean, DEXA scan here is about $120, you
Yeah.
know, so that's really affordable for a lot of corporates and a lot of executives. Functional blood tests when you go to functional practitioner are pretty much covered. biomedical insurance. So that's number one. Let's maybe make a top 5 or top 10 with regards to the technology that you would recommend people.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a maintenance perspective, um, if I can offer, and for men, you need to get your PSA chest tested. Um, you need to, as you say, get your hormonal profile under control. And for men, the inflammatory markers, the testosterone markers, as you said, free, total free and bioavailable, and understanding the difference and the focus on, bioavailable, which is circulating testosterone, which is available effectively for use. Um, Colonoscopy on a 2-year basis, for sure. I think general blood markers, absolutely. Every 3 to 6 months for me. And then, I think if I can sort of put arterial health into that equation, I think it's just foundational. And I think the reason why I got into, firstly investing in Cardiex and seeing the opportunity for disruption in the sector, when you look at longevity, Steve, you really can't have discussion around longevity without, focusing on arterial health. I mean, it's the number one killer globally. Over $350 billion spent in the US, annually, for cardiovascular specific, and then comorbidities, kidney disease, cognitive health, principally those diseases. We have 113 to 100, I think 115 million hypertensives in the USA, and upwards of 20 million deaths globally. So, and the other issue, the more important issue, is 40% of that 120 odd million in the US with hypertension don't even know they've got hypertension, or they're not under treatment for it. So, when you look at across the board from the purposes of the number one driver of the key metabolic diseases, and I would just say cardiovascular disease, and cognitive health, just leaving diabetes to the side for the moment, arterial health is foundational. And what I saw when I started looking at the sector was, one, from a purely capitalist perspective, and the perspective of disrupting an industry that really for 150 years hadn't really seen any industry innovation. We're still using the same sphygmomanometer that was invented a little over 150 years ago. We've had some innovation, basically in relation to cuff inflation. That's about it. But really, from a biomarker perspective, we're still using the same systolic and diastolic values as the fundamental tool to put people into a pathway of treatment and diagnostics and treatment, right? So there's that. And then from the purposes of impact, really, if we can expand education and awareness, if we can communicate better, if we can monitor better, and if we can be at the forefront of developing software and devices in order to provide biomarkers that give us much earlier identification of risk, and the ability to intervene earlier, then that's going to have the most, if not a significant impact on the global global health outcomes. So really, that was really the focus, and really building tools. And look, this is not just when I talk about Cardiex and Connect Health and what we're doing with the Pulse device and our legacy devices we've had in the market beforehand. We've been in the market for 25 years. Basically, 50 years of research, going right back to Dr. Michael O'Rourke, the cardiologist in Sydney, who developed the technology. It's been used by pharmaceutical companies, researchers. We've got 23,000 papers on PubMed on our devices. So 50, plus clinical trials with everyone that you can sort of roll off your tongue, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and so on and so forth across multiple disorders. So this is not a new technology. What we've done, where I saw the opportunity, was really like Aura has done with sleep, like Whoop has done with performance fitness, and really like I think more like Levels have done with metabolic health. Um, I saw the opportunity to create awareness and branding around a specific category. And so they have all been able to create categories around these sectors. No one's been able to do that around arterial health because you know, these are, lazy incumbents, no innovation. It was just like Boost Mobile back in 2000 when we came to the United States. Five telcos, no innovation, no prepaid phones in the United States, and no consumer. This was, 25 years ago. So we were the first consumer, first prepaid, first disruptor, became the largest prepaid mobile phone company by creating a brand around, a kind of boring business, which was, cell phones. So that's where I get excited about it because, if we can educate and create a brand and create a brand around vitality and lifestyle and thriving forward through better arterial health and provide the tools through our devices for that, then to me, that's super impactful.
Sure. Wow. Well said. And I'm just being on your website and having a look at it. You're looking at central blood pressure, central pulse pressure, augmentation index, subendocardial viability ratio. So
Yeah.
there's a lot here and it can get quite technical. I don't want to get into the weeds, but maybe you can just comment on just how important the blood pressure is that, we do in the office and people have got the technology at home. Is that still pretty relevant? And then, the importance, maybe you can sort of just put it in layman's term of all these new factors and data points that have
Yeah,
you
of course.
discovered.
Yeah, we present them in very simple forms on the device, on the Pulse device, as well as on the Connect Health app. So very, very consumer focused, just like Levels has done, how they've sort of deciphered, um, glycemic load and the
Mm,
technicalities around insulin resistance and put it into a very consumer-friendly format. That's what we've done on the Connect Health app. So
okay.
look, it's absolutely relevant. Standard systolic and diastolic blood pressure,
Mm,
100%. But there's a better way, just like using MRI guided MRI technologies for guided surgeries, just like we're not peeing on a sugar strip anymore for
yeah.
diabetes. So really, this is an innovation and brachial blood pressure, which, as you know, is the pressure measured at the arm, has always been a surrogate for the gold standard, which is central blood pressure.
Yes.
So the problem has been, Steve, is that the only way historically you could measure central blood pressures was invasively through a stent through the aorta, and it's normally done in an ICU setting. So we were able to, and why it's relevant is because it's really the true pressures felt at the heart, and its proximity to the major organs, the brain and the kidneys, most specifically. So over 20 years ago, we were able to show through a clinical trial, through our algorithms and what's called a generalized transfer function, that we could get the same central pressures using our technology and our algorithms through a traditional brachial cuff. So it's just like a normal blood pressure monitor, as you can see on the
Mm,
website, but it is a very specific inflation and deflation algorithm, which
okay.
allows us to catch the pressure waveforms at the heart. So what does that give us? It gives us a number of unique parameters from what's called the pulse wave, which is basically the reflective wave through the arteries that we can slice and dice into all those biomarkers that you outlined. So the things like augmentation index, which is a medical term. So it's really the stiffness felt in the arteries, and so these are both augmentation index and pressure indicators of arterial stiffness, which, by the way, presents itself anywhere from 6 months to 3 years before someone becomes hypertensive. So you could present in a physician's office normal blood pressure, but you could have arterial stiffness, which is basically, this time bomb that's building that you're not aware of through traditional diagnostics. And also importantly, when you look at coronary calcification scores, which I'm not sure whether you have in South Africa, it's a big thing here, the
Yeah,
calcium
big thing.
scores. So you can be a 0 on calcium,
Yeah,
coronary calcium score, but still have arterial stiffness. You don't know you've got coronary calcification until you have coronary
yeah,
calcification.
exactly.
There is no indication of risk except for stiffening of the arteries. So
Okay.
fundamental. Central pulse pressures is really the pressure felt at the major organs, brain, kidneys, the placenta in maternal health, for example. So a whole suite of biomarkers which come together that really just better inform risk and allows physicians to independently decide whether they should put that patient down a pathway of further tests. So you can do it in your home. It's a simple process. And then, really have a much more complete picture that your physician can look at to decide whether you need, MRI, calcium scores, whatever, start you on a pathway. No different to what Grail is doing or Function or, all these biomarker companies really providing just a whole suite of tools to better inform risk.
Okay. So is this directly to the consumer, or are you doing it to, B2B, to doctors, physicians, clinics, or who's it available for?
Yeah, so our traditional devices, which we sell through Cardiex to our medical customers, mainly for pharmaceutical companies as well as for researchers and specialist clinicians. So what we've really done is, well, let me just step back. And the reason why the market's been confined to those industries has really been a cost and usability because of cost and usability. Our traditional device has been anywhere from sort of $8,000 to $35,000, and they've required very specific medical training in terms of their application. You need a tonometer for some of them, and some other unique applications of how you do the treatment. So now what we've been able to do with the Connect Pulse is put that same technology into a sub $500 box in a format that's very accessible from a cost perspective, and from a UI perspective, and now make it available directly to patients and consumers. So
Okay.
if you've looked at the Connect Health website, and that's with a QT, Connect with a
Yes.
QT, not a CT.
Mm.
That's where we're making the Pulse available to consumers. So we launched 2 months ago. Direct to patient. So it requires an RX, so a prescription, but that's all done in the back end of the website, like instantaneously when you're ordering. So it's still obviously FDA cleared. So we need a prescription just given the nature of the diagnostics at the moment. So available in the US at the moment. It's going fantastic. Feedback's just unbelievable, life-changing for a lot of people. Feedback, physicians, the industry, pharmaceutical partners. So yeah, I was super happy with it.
So you're saying it's FDA approved, so it's a medical device, and that's why you need a prescription. So they would have to have a consult. The client would have to have a consult with someone and then get a prescription. Is that the way it's going?
Yeah, it's super simple. I mean, there's two sorts of clearances you can get with the FDA. You can get sort of RX, which requires a prescription, and then you can get over-the-counter OTC,
Mm.
which is basically you can buy it in the pharmacy, right?
Yeah.
So when you go onto the website, you only have to answer two questions. Are you pregnant? And do you have a history of any of these disorders? Click two boxes. It gets fired up to our cardiologist telehealth partner. And in the back end, you get an immediate script. You don't even see it happening. There's no blink. It's like
Okay.
just ordering on Amazon. It's
Okay.
just two boxes on a form, ticks up to our RX partner. It's all done in the back end through our technology. But technically, we have to sort of do that at the back end. But from a patient perspective, there's no impact whatsoever. They don't have to see anyone, don't have to talk. It's like a 5-second process.
Sure. Okay, that's pretty amazing. And so when people get all this, the data, then what do they do with it? They go to their medical doctor or physician and say, this is the story. And then obviously I can see on the website, and we'll put all the show notes, like augmentation index, it looks like it's central blood pressure, So it's obviously a lot more accurate in terms of the start of arterial sort of stiffness in what you're saying. Then they got the data, they present it to their physician, and then the physician hopefully knows what to do with the data.
Yeah, so we market it as a arterial assessment kit. So we don't market the device front forward. We really market the kit. So very similar to what Viome does with bacterial health. So um, as you know, I'm not sure whether you know Viome, the bacterial health company. Yeah. So they ship you a kit, basically a poop tube. You send it back, you get diagnostics, and go from there with your biomarkers from a nutritional perspective, etc. So we market the Connect Arterial Assessment Kit. So basically, it's part of the kit. You get the device, and you also get 2 cardiology reports with that. So this is the whole back end that we've developed around our cardiology network and telehealth that we're providing with this service. So the idea is that you start taking readings, and then over the course of weeks, you build up a profile. And once we've received enough data, normally anywhere from sort of 3 weeks to a month, then all that data is fed up to our cardiology network. You have a real live cardiologist review the data and basically provide you with a very detailed report on your cardiovascular health and your risk, both from an overview of your biomarkers. This is like a 6-page report, and then a 3-page report, which is very individualized and specific to you for your physician.
Okay.
So outlining your arterial health, describing what the parameters mean, and then making recommendations for your physician. So it's part of an ongoing program and maintenance around your arterial health that we provide as part of the assessment kit.
So you pay the assessment kit once, and then you get this ongoing support.
Yeah, you get two reports as part of the purchase. So it's $350, including 2 cardiology reports. You get to keep the device no matter whether you continue getting reports or not. So we're hoping that our customers will find so much value in the reports that they'll continue to provide or continue to receive reports over 6-month periods or whatever that may end up being.
So then there's a small cost if they want to carry on getting the reports once they've used the 2 reports.
Yeah, it'll end up. We haven't commenced with additional reports yet because we've just been up for a couple of months, but it'll probably be in the order of like $25 for each report going forward. So we think it's easily affordable.
And after all these thousands of studies and looking at arterial health, I think I saw on your on the one of the websites you had Dr. J. Raffaella in
Yeah.
terms of what he had to say. I mean, how important is this? I mean, are we saying it's an 8, 9 out of 10 for someone? I mean, cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer worldwide. Modern day cities and modernity, those numbers are just at another level. Not necessarily the deaths, but people just suffering with it. I mean, 80% of South Africans over the age of 50, 80% have
Yeah.
hypertension. I mean,
80. Yeah, it's crazy.
80%. I
Yeah.
mean, that is crazy, crazy numbers. And people don't realize how important, hypertension is in terms of a risk factor for cardiovascular disease and stroke. So in terms of importance, what have you found over all these studies and have been using products, firstly from a B2B perspective and now obviously B2C?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the headline is that central pressures are much more predictive, upwards of 40% more predictive than brachial pressures. You can have normal brachial pressures, but be above range in central, which basically means you should be under treatment. So that's upwards of a 30% group of Americans of those who go through the system, have their blood pressure tested, that are not being identified at risk for hypertension. The numbers are huge as they stand, but they're even greater when you look at deeper biomarkers around risk of hypertension. So much more predictive, much better in terms of, and when you look at someone like Dr. Raphael, for example, a sort of use case from a practice perspective, central pressures and arterial pressures provide a significant part of his diagnostic, a concierge functional medicine doctor. So he uses it both for identification of risk as well as for titration of treatments, in terms of, moving the dials around the specific treatments that he prescribes to his patients. So, from a study perspective, not just from the perspective of cardiovascular risk, but from cognitive risk, from Alzheimer's, you look at vascular Alzheimer's and the impact we can have in that sector, which is why we're working with Dr. Bredesen at the moment in terms of incorporating central pressures into the RECODE program that he both and pre-code in terms of monitoring patients for risk of cognitive decline. So that's the paradigm that we're trying to create. Better identification of risk, earlier intervention, because when you look at this whole narrative around lifespan and health span, right, which is flooding the world. When you look at the goal of that, which is ultimately better outcomes, the foundational way you can change that is by earlier interventions and earlier identification of risk, and really that's how we're trying to position ourselves.
Brilliant. Well done to you. The three biggest things that are going to reduce central pressure, in your view, I'd love for you to sort of comment on mine, but what are the three big things that are going to decrease that central blood pressure?
Yeah, so it comes down to the big rocks, right? Exercise, nutrition, number one, smoking cessation, alcohol, lifestyle adjustments. There's no specific exercise. There's some studies around high intensity interval training and arterial stiffness, which are pretty impactful. The same for SEVA, which is subendocardial viability ratio. You pointed out it's an indication of oxygen efficiency. The ability to process blood efficiently at the heart. So it's kind of like VO2 max, but from a circulatory performance perspective rather than an oxygen efficiency perspective. So there's specific studies around intensity training for those biomarkers. Generally, it's like more is not better from the purposes of cardiovascular load and health, and we're seeing that more and more across the populations. It's important that we're at the forefront of educating around this and developing this awareness, because this is really the start of it, Steve. So what we're doing from the point of view of social media and newsletters and the conference participations, everything we're in, we're targeting specific markets, but we're also targeting markets that have traditionally not been a focus. For example, there's upwards of, I think the last statistics for the American Heart Association last year, 66% increase in cardiovascular disease for young persons, which is defined as 18 to 44 years old. So a significant increase. Cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of college athletes. So that's a thing, right? Mostly basketball players, believe it or not. And I think just given the skew of that demographic, mostly Black basketball players. So all these metrics are sort of filling the pot, and it's getting it should be at boiling point, right? We should be talking about it more, but it's not sexy. It's not a corner of the internet that we can get attention of, like Brian Johnson's blueprint and all the crazy theories out there, or Dave Asprey saying that you follow my protocol, you can have 30-minute orgasms.
Yeah.
This doesn't make the news. Unfortunately, we're in Heart Health Month at the moment, and the problem is it's Heart Health Month. It should be Heart Health Year, right?
Yeah.
Like everything. So, we are taking it upon ourselves to, to educate, communicate, and provide the tools to monitor better across the populations. And we're lucky that I think it's a blessing and a curse that we have the internet and the tools that we have, because we do all now, as a population, have access to much more information. But the problem is, this is the extremes of the internet now. We're getting politicized from a health perspective, just like we have from a political perspective. And, the pendulum finds it very hard to sort of hang in the middle and be truly focused on science. So that's really what we've got ahead of us with, I think, the current administration. We need to be, more, vigilant and rigorous around, where the truth is, and it's always somewhere in the middle, right? But it's never been with the health industry. I mean, the health should be something that's truly democratized, and we should all agree on it, no matter what our political persuasion. I mean, there was a time where pretty much everyone in America watched CNN because it was the trusted news source, right? Now it's just, the left side of the pendulum. Um, and we need to get health back to that. Um, we need to have agreement, because I think this is too big an issue. This
Yeah.
is not about whether, how progressive we should be, or whether, we should be cutting, federal budgets. This is about human lives, and this is about, the health of the nation. And the world follows the US. So it follows our FDA clearances. It follows, our health technology. So we can't afford for this to be politicized. So the challenge is to educate with enough authority, that we can, that takes it out of the political environment and provide tools that, are going to make an impact.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, we'll come to the end of the show. There's been a lot of despair, discouragement. I've been here 26 years, but in the last 4, 5 years, I've never seen people have, the mental ill health that they've got, mental performance plummeting, disease at another level, family, friends, it's just exponentially increasing. Give a message of hope just to people listening out there, because I think people are overwhelmed. Big food, big agriculture, big tech. I mean, this is a tech that is going to help us. There's a lot of
Yeah.
tech that can help us, but there's a lot of tech that can hurt us. So just give us a short message of hope for people listening all over the world. We're in 159 countries now, this podcast. And
Yeah.
I think people would just really appreciate from someone like who's a techpreneur, or, someone who's really wants to change a lot of people's lives through technology.
Yeah. Firstly, congratulations on your podcast.
Yeah.
That's great. Um, So, look, I think every day it's hard to get out of bed, right? With everything that's going on. So I think, like with everything, you've just got to get up and just push forward and thrive forward. And, think about, the value that you're providing to yourself through your health and your family and, your support group and everyone around you. And that's all that matters, because, everything that's going on around us at the moment, is really, noise, but, understandably, a lot of noise. But for me, it's a matter of, just as I said at the top of the hour, it's really about, thriving in the moment. And I think if you're struggling with your health, I think the opportunity to lead a better life, one that's, more impactful, that's more energetic, that will just provide immeasurable benefits as you age. The opportunity presents itself every time you get up in the morning and, take a step out of bed, and, right down to what you grab in the fridge, what you think, what you focus on. So, my message is absolutely one of hope, but I think it needs to be grounded in health, because no matter what happens in the world, that's all you have left. And, I've been around enough sick people, and I've been exposed to enough of my own health challenges to know that when that pin drops, I see nothing else matters. As a physician, Steve, as you know, when people get a cancer diagnosis, or um, cardiovascular diagnosis, or heart disease, whatever it may be, right? Your whole mindset shifts from all that you thought matters to a whole different funnel of mostly pain and hurt. So um, my mission is to just prevent as many people as possible falling into that. And if I can make a small impact, like I feel I do, through people who read my book and follow my messages, um, then to me that's a life worth living. But everything is grounded in your health. Once you lose that, um, it's hard to get back.
Thanks, Craig Cooper. I just want to declare favor and blessing over you, that you would thrive, that you would rise up on wings of eagles, because I think we need more and more people like you, just helping more and more the public, because I think it's just been a really tough place for many people, as you've said. It's a lot of big industry against you, making life very easy for you and thinking of shareholders better for them than rather the public. So thank you so much. We'll chat offline because I've got some ideas, but thank you so much.
Awesome.